So we're back with another edition of the best films to watch whilst tripping, and I think this is an even better list than last time. It's a bit more concise and the films are a bit more psychedelic in nature. This film is called Fantastic Planet from 1973. This is a French, Czechoslovakian animated feature that centres on a strange alien world in which tiny humans are governed by large humanoid creatures. This is one of the quintessential psychedelic science fiction movies. On the planet in question, the humans, known as Ohms, live in tribes in the wild, whilst these large blue creatures, known as Trags, control the planet. But one day a few young Trags are playing with an Ohm and an infant child. Things go a little awry and one of the Ohms is killed, leaving her orphan son. So a young Trad named Tiwa is passing by with her father. Tiwa decides to take the baby Ohm home as a pet, names him Ter, and ends up giving him a portable headset that allows him to discover the history behind the Ohms and the Trags. Eventually he escapes with the headset and joins a group of Ohms, educates them on the goings on, and eventually this leads to an Ohm uprising. The director of the film, René Laloux, perfectly uses the impossible physical imagery and the amazing psychedelic visuals to serve as a socio-political allegory, which I feel points to the Soviet forces controlling Eastern Europe at the time of its release in 1973. The stop-motion animation is absolutely mesmerising, and the landscapes and the disturbing creatures are straight up out of a psychedelic-infused dream. The hallucinogenic movement as well is just utterly beautiful, really, and it makes for an extremely eccentric film and one that's great to watch on mushrooms or LSD. Next up is one of my very favourite films from possibly one of the greatest directors of all time in the area of surreal cinema, and that's David Lynch with his masterpiece that is Mulholland Drive.
This one comes highly recommended.
The dreamlike nature of the film's narrative structure and the wacky bizarre visuals are all absolutely perfect for when you're tripping and want to watch a film that requires a lot of watches to fully understand, so it's one of them that I think, due to the heightened conscious awareness that psychedelics put you under, it can actually enable you to interpret it in much deeper ways than you would in a sober state, because your awareness is just focused completely on what you're watching. And also it's an absolute feast for the eyes. The cinematography is great, the music is just absolutely incredible, and the acting from Naomi Watts is just absolutely impeccable. This is probably David Lynch's best film overall, in my opinion. It really sums up everything about who he is as a director, and it features some of the most memorable pieces of imagery and some of the most haunting and disturbing, so make sure you're not on a high dose or it might send you to some nightmare realm. On the surface it may seem very mysterious or illogical and confusing, but the more you watch it on the film's terms, it actually unravels and you understand the extreme amount of depth that is actually going on inside the film. So yeah, do yourself a favour and get this one watched as soon as possible, and if you like this then you better check out David Lynch's other work, because it's utterly mesmerising and haunting in the best possible way. Next on the list is another one of my very favourite films, and it's called Brazil by Terry Gilliam, who you may know was actually one of the Pythons. He did all of the surreal, funky animated sequences in the series and films, and he's actually the only American Python. Most trippers probably know Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is easily Terry Gilliam's most famous film within the psychonaut community. But I chose this film instead because sometimes it gets overlooked. It's one of the funniest films I've ever seen in my entire life, and coupled with the disturbing, freaky, warped imagery, it's just absolutely enchanting. It's inundated with these exceedingly strange visuals, and it brilliantly blends black comedy, sci-fi and satire in a way that not many films do. Obviously this film takes a lot of influences from Orwellian fiction, namely 1984, and it's just such an inventive film that is a delight to behold. It holds up even today. I've watched it so many times, even with some of the overly graphic disturbing sequences, it's still just such an enjoyable ride and one not to be missed.
Sam, it's time for you to grow up and accept responsibility. Your poor father would be appalled at your lack of promotion.
Mother, I just wish you would stop interfering. I don't want promotion. I'm happy where I am.
No, you're not. Jack Lint is a lesson to you. He doesn't have your brains, but he's got the ambition. You haven't got the ambition. Luckily, you've got me and the Deputy Minister. Mr. Helpman was very close to your father.
Please, Mrs. Lowry, don't get upset. Mr. Lowry, please wait in reception. You're giving her wrinkles.
You see?
God. Just try and relax, Mrs. Lowry. I'll make you 20 years younger.
Oh, Dr. Jaffe, you are a genius. Would you like to be Surgeon General? I know simply everybody.
Well, they won't know you when I've finished with you. First, we remove the excess derma. So, now the flaccid tissues under the eyes, and forehead. Simple. Now, I lift the wrinkles and the worry lines right up into the wig, into the hairline. Now the template. There, now a bit of sticky. And already
Gonna
she's
start
twice
sounding
as
like a
beautiful as
broken
she was
record here,
before.
but this is another one of my very favourite films of all time from another one of the best directors ever, which is Paul Thomas Anderson, who you might know, who directed There Will Be Blood, probably its most famous and critically acclaimed film. The reason I'd pick this to watch on Psychedelics is because a big theme of Psychedelics is how they connect you with the higher consciousness of the universe and how everything is ultimately connected in even the most minuscule ways. Everything is felt to be as one in a non-dual sense whilst on psychedelics in the higher doses. And this film, I think, perfectly captures how the characters are portrayed in a way that interlinks them cohesively, in the way that in real life how people are drawn to each other and cross paths in seemingly random ways, but ultimately it's all part of the web-like structure of the entire universe. The film doesn't really have a major plot to drive home, but it's all completely driven by its characters and the turmoil that they experience, and how this all interlinks and how their problems are all sort of reflections of one another. I find the characters utterly compelling, and their search for love and forgiveness is really powerful and very emotional. It also features some of the best acting ever by Tom Cruise. He plays the most perfect pick-up artist, narcissist I've ever seen. And Paul Thomas Anderson's directing is just utterly fascinating. The tracking shots are so hard to figure out how we actually film them. It's just a craft that's not often seen in film, and it's funny because this is like his second film, and before his absolute masterpiece that was There Will Be Blood. It's a very long film, so it's perfect to watch if you're having a really long trip, and it's one I think will really touch people's soul. It resonates with me so deeply, and it's one that I think is often overlooked due to its length. Also, not to mention the absolutely fantastic soundtrack, the use of licensed tracks and the official music. It's just a treat for the eardrums in general.
I'm Phil Parma. See, this is the scene of the movie where you helped me out.
And there's the story of a mother.
I'm Rose Gator.
You come home soon after the show. I love you.
Love you too.
And the daughter.
I'm Claudia Wilson Gator.
Now that I've met you, would you object to never seeing me again?
And the police officer in love.
I'm Officer Jim Curring. My life is very stressful, and I'd hope to have a relationship that is very calm and undemanding and loving. So if you are this person, please leave me a message at box number 82.
And this will all make sense in the end.
The last film on our list, and by far the most overtly psychedelic in influence, is Enter the Void. I bet a lot of trippers have already seen this one, but for those who haven't, it actually centres on DMT, or dimethyltryptamine. It examines the process of one man's usage of the substance and how it actually relates to his death. This isn't a spoiler, this is one of the core plot points of the film, that he actually gets shot and starts to perceive his life from an out-of-body experience, or his soul has actually left his body, and it's very psychedelic and trippy in nature. As you can see on the screen, there's some awesome DMT-inspired visuals with fractals and kaleidoscopic imagery. The cinematography is utterly amazing, from Gaspar Noé, who made the very infamous film called Irreversible, and it just shows his talent as a director to go from this very gritty rape and revenge film to a psychedelic inspired psychological sort of sci-fi horror film. It'll take you down a wormhole like no other film. It's very long and drawn out and gives you a lot of time for introspection. It's almost like tripping in a sense. The guy obviously has had a lot of experience using mushrooms, as he said in the past. He actually made this quote saying, "One day in my 20s, I had done too many mushrooms. I turned on the TV as I was coming down, and it was showing Lady in the Lake, the Robert Montgomery film noir that's filmed entirely through the character's eyes. I wasn't so much hallucinating at that point, but I thought it would be great to make a movie like this and add all the experiences I had on mushrooms. Telepathic perception, strange colours around people, the sense of floating. The maelstrom of neon colours and dazzling imagery, enough to make the viewer feel like they're tripping themselves if they're not under the influence of any substance. This is one that's not probably enjoyed best with friends, but one that you can just experience by yourself and lose yourself in the atmosphere of the film. It's not one of my favourite films, and I do have some flaws with it, but it's just one of them that needs to be experienced. It's quintessential viewing for a psychonaut, I believe.
Probably wants a blowjob. It's disgusting. Or they think I am anyways. I know I'm not a junkie. Stuff doesn't taste good. These drugs taste like shit. Wow, it's already kicking in. This is it. It started. Oh God. This is the best. What if I faint?